Then we've got Gitten Guy from FuseNet, who will give us his customer FuseNet outlook for is it just Zimbabwe or is it the region? Zimbabwe. So, and then after that, we'll be having our annual general meeting. So a bit of a packed afternoon. Jacques, would you like to come up and? This is for the online.
Oh, for online.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine. Just go right to the beginning, please. Afternoon, everyone. I've tried to cover the main regions that affect us as Zimbabwe from a supply and demand sort of aspect. So for us as PHI, we traditionally import a lot of grain for the in-score group of companies, obviously Profeeds, National Foods, Irvins, Colgate. So I'm just going to run through the main countries. So if we could just go to the next slide, please. Being obviously Malawi, Zambia, Mozambique, South and Zim. We don't do a hell of a lot with Malawi like we used to a couple of years back. We did, maybe 5-10 years ago. But as things have changed, we've seen less requirement from Malawi. We do occasionally still do beans and meal, that kind of product. But in terms of your maize, we haven't moved much from there for, yeah, probably a number of years. Can we just go to the next one, please? So I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. The region is in a drought, whether it's Zimbabwe, South Africa, Zambia, Mozambique, Malawi. It's the same being seen everywhere. What I've stated here, you'll see it coming right throughout the presentation. So as it stands, Malawi, we can't get a gist of the crop. There are good rains in certain areas, other regions being affected with not so much rain, and we can't get a crop estimate at this stage, be it on soya or maize, but over the next few weeks, you'll probably see it. But there's definitely a reduction in hectarage on your maize, which I think you're seeing around the region. Rain outlook, yes, it's been okay, but as we go into February and getting into March, it's not looking so great in certain areas. They have had issues around fertilizers, and the yields are likely going to be down because guys have not had the money on the small scale to purchase their fertilizers for the crops. So the yields will certainly be down on top of just having a reduced hectarage. We skip to the next one. So Malawi is just very brief overview of that. Zambia, probably one of our bigger influencers who've literally just on Tuesday closed their borders for maize and roller meal exports to Zimbabwe. So that will have some impact. We traditionally, in the last couple of seasons, have been getting a lot of our soya beans from there, as well as soya meal. Maize of late has become a little bit less as they focus on protecting their own food security within the country. So as it stands, Zambia is definitely down on hectarage. You're seeing a case where they will probably not export any maize into Zimbabwe. So we're going to be reliant on South Africa as we go into this next marketing season. The northern region has been extremely dry. Has had decent rainfall, but as it stands right now with the latest reports out of Zambia within the last sort of 24, 48 hours, there are guys who are seeing dryland crops literally dying in the field. We can't ascertain the hectarage that's involved there yet, but it will have a significant impact on their maize outcome for the season. Predictions of the 3.5 to 4 million ton crop, but that would have seen us have exports from there, but it's probably going to be less than that. So if they don't achieve a decent crop, we won't see any maize coming from them to here. It will predominantly be held for Zambia itself and possibly some exports into the northern region. Their northern borders are quite porous. They have tried to clamp down on it over the last year, but you could still see something going across the border. El Nino, I think that's something we've spoken quite some time now. It's definitely going to carry on for quite some time, definitely into the mid of this year. Can we skip to the next one, please? Mozambique. So we haven't done much with Mozambique for a long time. I think Zimbabwe and Mozambique's ties of, we haven't seen much crop coming from there. Traditionally have small scale crop. It remains within the country, but same problems. El Nino has taken its toll there, and even their small scale crop in itself will be much reduced to what they've had over the previous seasons. Skip to the next one. South Africa being our biggest market, biggest influence, especially now in the last couple of months since November, we've predominantly imported from South Africa. And I think any other entity in the country that's milling or into production, like be it milling or feed industry, has been receiving quite a large amount of imports. I mean, ourselves, we're importing close on 20 to 25,000 tons a month, where if you look at the entire sector, it's probably about 35 in that sort of region. So yeah, maize, with the way it's going this year, their crop is predicted to be a little bit smaller than last year. Prices are very firm and quite volatile. We've seen prices jumping in one day by $15 to $20 a ton. So it has been up and down, but we're seeing firm pricing at this stage. Would obviously have an impact on our own market and hopefully see the farmers here get a reasonable return for their maize this season. So yeah, they're still getting rain in certain areas, but again, as it stands with the most recent discussions just last week with guys, it's still looking pretty dry in quite a lot of the regions there. So they, much the same as anybody else, do need a bit of rain quite soon. Otherwise, they're going to see a much smaller crop as well. But yeah, we're predicting around 14 million, maybe a bit less. So last year they had a pretty decent crop, and that's why we're seeing so much of that maize come here now. And it depends on what government decide with our own crop, but hopefully once our harvest starts, the borders will probably close for a few months. But that window could be maybe 2 to 3 months at best, so that we can at least support the local crop. There certainly won't be enough of our local crop. I'll get to the numbers just now. But we're going to be importing quite a lot from South Africa right now through to harvest. It's going to carry on with this regime that all the companies have got. And then straight after harvest, I don't think it'll take long till we have to reopen and continue with imports. Can we skip to the next one? So internationally speaking, there is influence from the US markets, especially on South Africa. They do track a lot from the American region. So that will have implications on the South African market as we go with the supplies and demands. The current market, like I said, it is a little bit overpriced in South Africa. That's our personal feeling. But that does obviously have an impact here, quite a large impact. So white maize will remain volatile simply because South Africa grows a lot of white, whereas the US yellow maize is more predominant in those regions. So the yellow maize prices in South Africa will probably remain somewhat lower than your white. Although I think in the feed industry, anyone who does feed will tell you that they prefer yellow to white maize. Just it's a lot simpler for feed. There have been guys who've traditionally not wanted to mix yellow and white. Some companies don't have an issue with that, but you're now seeing that you need less additives and all those things in your feed. So they'd rather just take yellow and do that for their feed. Go to the next one, please. I've just put a small spreadsheet for you to see what the pricings are currently looking like. This was as at Monday. I mean, the prices could obviously have changed again today, but that just gives you an indication. So what I've done at the top there, you've got white maize with rail, white maize road, yellow maize, and that's obviously Harare top section, Bulawayo for the bottom section. And you can see the price. If you look in the second line and the fourth line, I've just made that in bold so that you can try to see how the pricing tracks through until December. So it's staying quite firm in the 340, 360 region almost. Whether our pricing is going to open in a similar fashion, we can't quite put a finger on it with the volatility of the South African market. So if it remains volatile, guys are going to be looking at positions that they've already taken and seeing how much they need to buy quite quickly, or if they need to sit and wait before they start opening on the local market. So I think the stock cover should be pretty good going into harvest. All the big companies have got the cover and have pipelines in place to ensure that they have got the stock until our local season starts. I do think if the price isn't right, farmers will potentially hold on the local side until they can get a better price. And it'll put pressure on companies to not drop the price just because they think they can rely on imports later on. So hopefully that's helpful to everyone. Mike, I think, are you sharing this to everyone afterwards? So at least you can have a look at it afterwards. We go to the next one. I've just done a slide to show what the production of South Africa has been over the last few years. I think if you go 2016 and beyond, it's not too relevant to now. But if you look from 2019, they have grown pretty large crops of that sort of 10,000, 12,500, million and over, with the last couple of years being quite substantially large crops in that 14 million ton plus region. So when they do have those bigger 14, 15 million ton crops, you see a lot of impact on our market this side. This is pretty accurate data. It is up to date. So yeah, we're just waiting for the next set of stats to come out on that. They haven't finished the 2023 stats. Good. For Zimbabwe, yeah, I think we can, it's pretty self-explanatory right now. I think we're all quite desperate for rain. Brendan and myself from Staywell have been chatting. The rains have not been good. A lot of farmers right now are quite desperate for rain. Whether you've got irrigation or not, you know, there is the impact of power on your irrigation as well. So yes, you might have water, but you might not have power. And it's incredibly expensive to water a crop, especially if you're looking at wheat. But even on maize and your soyas, to water a crop on diesel is quite expensive and just becomes unviable at a certain point. So we have seen, just from my own personal travels in November, December, guys who had planted maize without any water back in October, only germinating sort of first week, second week of December. How far spread that is, I don't really know myself, but what we are seeing is that in terms of your small scale crops, they are struggling with water. Commercials likewise are having issues. But yeah, definitely the small scalers who planted with no water are going to have problems on yield. Crop estimate, I think this is one that we're all not too sure on. We're all looking at 1 million tons plus at one stage. I've been pretty conservative up until recently, where we're saying 850 to 1 million. We think that figure could even be less. Even 750 could be high. You know, we do have a SGR requirement of about 500,000 tons. So the fact that we're not going to see much more than your SGR requirement, and you have a government that don't have funding to purchase the crop, there will be issues. Our guys are going to have to deliver their maize to the GMB for Strategic Grain Reserve for this year. And if you do that, are you going to get paid? Because as of today with the wheat, there's still about $33 million outstanding to farmers, or 39, sorry, Brent, 39. And there's still about 33 billion Zim dollars, which is obviously small in the grand scheme of things at the moment. But it's really that 39 million that's a problem. And even the private sector cannot purchase that wheat at this stage. You know, there's a lot of issues around funding and being able to borrow or to even sit on that kind of stock. There's a lot of issues around that. So for government to take that 500,000 or whatever they might take, given they're currently sitting on about 100, it's going to be an issue. That's not going to be an option for guys to deliver unless they are specifically forced to deliver. Yeah, I think touching on imports at the bottom there, you know, like I said, from November, we've been importing in the region of 35,000 as a nation. The spread on pricing has been around that 320, 345 price, and now you're seeing it even tracking a bit higher. But that was sort of November through into early February. And yeah, we'll just have to see how that price tracks come harvest. Okay, next one. We will definitely be an importer. I think I made that clear already. As contractors, from the data that's there, it might be a little bit off, but maize grown is about 34,000 hectares. Soyas, the figure is a bit of a, there are some double counting that we're concerned about, but it's between 68 and 70,000, might be a bit less. Obviously, your yields on this are likely, yeah, to have an impact. I mean, soyas, we should hopefully see a slightly bigger crop than last year, but it's all rain dependent now. If the rain continues the way it is, you'll see that crop probably being much the same as last season. In terms of maize, yes, you have seen guys here favoring to grow soya rather than maize, where Zambia's had the opposite effect. And then, yeah, I've just put some stats there on the smallholder farmers, with whether this data from the government is 100% correct. We're obviously not 100% certain, but they claim that there's 744,000 hectares planted under small scale for maize, and 366 was our previous one, which we had indications of a record crop last year that we didn't see. So I think, yeah, if we get to 850,000 this year, it's going to be a lot. Let's skip to the next one, please. I've done a slight brief on soyas. I've been away for a couple of days, so I just put this in quickly. So with the soyas in South Africa, you're seeing it down. Again, we don't bring in a hell of a lot from there because it is traditionally more expensive. You are seeing a price at the moment of the 520s, 530 regions. Again, dry spell, potential impacts on the yields. Their market is currently trading at 2 million ton crop with 300,000 tons of carry. So there is exportable volume. And if there are supply issues this side, it could come in here. But again, the price has to work, which this is bordering. We're hoping this will be like a starting price for farmers come season. But as it currently stands, it is a little bit expensive, where Zambia has been landing at about $480 a ton. The Zambian crop definitely under pressure with the rainfall issues. The early crop predictions were around 450,000, but it's come down significantly in about the last week. But again, what's critical over the next 2-3 weeks is to see what the rain patterns do and how this is going to impact all our regional crops. Price predictions for Zambia also around the $500 a ton, which would obviously make it quite expensive if you have to import them here. You're looking at transport anywhere between $65, $70, depending where you bring them from. But if they're from the Lusaka region, you're probably banking on $60 plus your border fees, another $5, $10. So yeah, that'll be quite expensive crop landing at 560s, 580s in that region. Malawi soya predictions in the region of 300,000. We probably won't see much impact with their soya crop coming into Zimbabwe. We'll probably be reliant on Zambia if they do allow exports. Go to the next one. Then, yeah, just in closing, obviously, just highlighting again that El Nino is definitely going to have severe impacts on the country, and then that we will be very reliant on South Africa for our maize for the rest of the year and into the next marketing season. And I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Are there any questions or contributions on results?
Yes.
Years ago, we introduced new liquidity for South Africa being released. So how do we navigate that situation? What do we actually have?
Okay, so South African maize is traditionally GMO, which is why they yield so much more than us. But if you're importing GMO maize, you have to bring it in under the guide of the National Biotech Authority. So it's what we call supervised milling. So, but there's a flaw in it in that truck is not tracked from South Africa to here. So what happens in between? A driver can park off and offload some here and there. But when it gets to the mill, there is a person there that is overseeing every single load that comes in, make sure it goes into a silo and then gets milled. So that's kind of what's happened over the last few years. Our government's very strict on not wanting to grow GMO crops. I think that's their biggest issue. But bringing it in, provided you follow the right laws, then there's no problem. But again, they will control the border timings and when you can do all of your imports on the South African maize anyway. Why is it expensive? It's your transport costs and your cost of doing business. Obviously we've got banking fees that other countries don't have quite the same costs anymore, but it's more the transport. You're seeing maize in South Africa, 240, 250, you can pay up to $120 a ton in transport. So that's probably your biggest difference, is just the transport cost. It depends where you import from. We traditionally, as a company, try and import from the Northwest, which is cheaper transport in the region of 60s to 70s. But then you're seeing areas like Mpumalanga where they bring a $10, $15 premium on the crop just because of the region. So yeah, you can put it down mainly to transport.
Any more questions? Elliot.
Thank you so much. In terms of the GNB is holding, you said did 100,000?
It's between 85 to 100,000. Can't get an accurate read. I've seen their numbers that change on a regular basis. You see one figure, it's down, then it goes up, then it comes back down. They do tend to mix maize and traditional grain as well. On imports, yes.
guys are telling us that the supply that they have can take us up to the next level, which is 2025.
I mean, you just do the maths, 35,000 and you've got 100,000 in stock. You don't have 12 months. You know, they were trying to give the millers, the maize millers in December, I think it was, or yes, it was December, Brent, where they wanted to do a 25,000 ton allocation to the millers. They stopped it because they don't have the stock. Then they said, no, you can swap. You give us South African maize and we'll give you local maize as a stopgap. But that fixed nobody's problem. So yeah, I'm pretty confident in my figures. I would imagine it's around that 85 to 100. You can't get an absolute accurate figure, but it won't be more than 100. Not given the figures that we had that were very accurate come around November.
Sandy, you had a
Feel free to say.
Yeah, sure.
The man on the ground. Because if the whole region is short on maize, plus or minus South Africa, but we're not the only market for South Africa. They've got their local market. Does this mean that the food prices are significantly going to be going up?
I don't think so. Given that we're already importing at those same sort of pricing levels, it shouldn't see a massive increase in the price. There might be a very small increase. So if you go back to the South African one, if we go back to that slide, it does go through until December 2024. So it's not a massive change from where we are now. And I don't see the price of food for the consumer going up massively because we've been trading, you've seen prices of maize, I think in December, guys buying maize at 450. I even saw someone who got paid 500. And it was just, there was an opportunity. And then those guys are selling roller meal that is effectively not got any additives. It's just a straight run because that's how they make the price work. But if you have to add all the other things, then a 500 price is just not viable. But yeah, I think at those 350s, 360s, you won't see the price increase because we've traded, I think even local maize that was available in sort of October, November, December was trading at those prices. And there has been a blip, but you've also had tax implications. So with all the new ZIMRA laws, that's also already put the price up. So you've got a blend that's happened over the last few months. And if we're trading at similar levels, then you shouldn't see it go much higher than where it is now, if even go higher. There should be, yes. But it depends on what their export plans are. You know, they also export to various regions. So if they're happy to supply it, then we shouldn't have a problem. We've got strong ties in our company with South Africa as such, and I know even others have got the same. But at the end of the day, you are at the mercy of what their own government can do at the end of the day. But yes, we should have enough. Yeah, there should be enough there. There's not much of an option other than Zambia. Mozambique certainly won't export. You won't bring American in here, ever. Highly unlikely. Brent? Yeah.
Essentially lower price. Also have the value chain pressure of government from a food security issue. This afternoon, I decided to do what I've done with wheat, a record crop, which is still allowed rolling on an untariffed, duty-free, and then pressure on your maize millers and software manufacturers locally to pay the cost of production plus type pricing model through to maize in an environment where your miller also cannot borrow and domestic liquidity and gearing ratios are out the window. So I just wonder, it's almost like a perfect storm.
Yeah, 100%.
Ton GNB tonnage sitting there, 500,000 ton SGR requirement, very small domestic crop. The only thing we actually surplus to, like requirement to, like, you know, wheat, pressure on a winter crop going through with reactive power supply.
And the
water issues there, as you've alluded to, $40 million still owed to domestic farmers, 70 days away from planting a winter crop. I just wonder how we're going to avoid a catastrophe that then what we are picking up from our insurers is that at least this drought is likely to only be a 1-year issue. They're actually projecting now that the 24-25 rainy season, I think like we discussed. this
Yeah,
morning, certainly
Could be better.
will be better. How we capitalize on that and actually see the reality, which only seems to be dawning 1 minute before harvest, as to what we.
Yeah, and I think we all have the same problem with, like Brendan and ourselves in the same industry. You're seeing decisions that get made last minute, and you can't operate like that. I think as the Food Crops Contractors Association and other entities, you try and lobby to get these guys to make decisions quickly, but we've just seen things get drawn out and drawn out. You're even seeing issues in GMB now where wheat has been paid for by a miller and they've been blocked loading the stock, and there's no actual reason for it, yet they need the money. But you need to be able to exit that stock so that you can buy another batch so that they can go pay more farmers. So yeah, definitely a perfect storm that's brewing. And I think we're all trying to lobby to get clear decision making, get firm pricing farmers that's fair to them at the end of the day, so they can at least go back and do another crop next year. And wheat is definitely under pressure this year with the rainfall going the way it is. Guys probably cutting between, I don't know, 30 to 50% hectares, depending on the area, depending what their rainfalls are like. Zesa increase, I think everyone's seen the Zesa has gone up quite drastically in January, so that's had an impact as well. You cannot grow a wheat crop under diesel. It just simply doesn't work. Yes.
I'm skeptical in terms of area funded savings portfolio.
Yeah, I think I alluded to the same thing. That's a government figure that even we don't necessarily feel is correct. And that's just small scale crop. It's almost double. Almost double. Yet correct.
I think there's some
Yeah, so obviously the government figures, I don't take any liability for that as such. Look, I think as the various groups that are into contracting, there is a lot of, I think there's a working group every Thursday as well, where guys are trying to improve that market data system. We have tried aerial overview systems. It works better in wheat. The problem in the maize season is you get a lot of sorghum and barley, and then the overhead satellites can't necessarily 100% differentiate when you just do a complete flyover. But yeah, we definitely need government data to improve. And I think the more we lobby, the more we'll get there. But it requires funding, it requires manpower, and it requires people who actually want to do the job. But if you don't get paid, are you going to do a proper job? I don't think so. So that's part of the problem. Thanks.
Right. I think we'll stop there. Jacques, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Gift, would you like to come up to the hotspot? Turn that on for online.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. What I'm going to say here, I think is what everyone is seeing out there. And I think like you asked, we speak more for the men and women on the ground because our mandate is to look at the vulnerable populations that USAID and other partners support with various forms of assistance. So it's just a brief outline in terms of mainly the progression of the season, the next so that's the outline of my presentation, the progression of the season, which I think everyone is now aware of after Jack's presentation. Thanks so much for that. And PHI are into business, they support industry. We are more into the vulnerable populations. So I think it's complementary in that regard. Okay, so we all know about the El Nino forecast from the regional perspective to the Zimbabwean perspective. The forecast was mainly for predominantly normal to below normal, with the high chances of below normal, which is what we are witnessing at the moment. So the SACOF, which is the regional forecast for Southern Africa, and the NACOF, which is the national forecast for Zimbabwe, I think they've been spot on in terms of the forecast for this year. So you were talking about planting. So this is what we have noticed for Zimbabwe. Delayed planting, there was a delayed onset of the rains, and therefore delayed planting across the country. A decade is a period of 10 days. So you'll find that some places that they recorded more than I would say 4 weeks into 5 weeks delays in terms of plantings. Those areas that normally plant around mid-November, they ended up planting end of December into early January. So planting progressed up until probably mid-January for cereals. Government set the 10th of January as the deadline, the cutoff point for planting, but we still saw farmers planting beyond the 10th of January, which is very worrisome because as of the first week of February, before we go any further, as of the first week of February, the Ministry of Agriculture, they reported that about 85% of the crop, 85% of the crop was in the vegetative stages. 85% of the crop by the first week of this month. So if the season is almost like gone, like we are saying, and we have that crop, which is 85%, but the bulk of the crop is still in the vegetative stages, I think it's spelling a very disastrous situation. So the situation, like Jack mentioned, is not peculiar to Zimbabwe. It's a regional crisis. Yeah, there were some. There are some areas which had some data issues areas. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah. Like this, the bulk of that area. Yeah, that's not correct. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Yes. We had some very early rains in October, but that crop failed. It just failed. Yes. Yes. Yeah. That October plant crop, almost all of it was a failure. So there was a lot of replanting following that failure. So yeah, so it's a regional issue. You can tell from this map here that much of Southern Africa is experiencing almost similar conditions to us, with the exception of I think northern Malawi, a little bit of northern Mozambique, but the bulk of the region is also in crisis. A little bit of some better situation in South Africa. The Triangle region is South Africa, but otherwise we find that most of our areas are 50 to 90% below normal. And even that below normal rainfall was very erratic. That makes it even worse. Below normal rains, which are very erratic, it makes it very. So this is from the Met Services Department. This was from last week, the Met Services Department. This is our cumulative rainfall from the 1st of October. So the Met Services Department, they check, officially our season starts on the 1st of October, and it ends by the 30th of March somewhere there, but they extend into April. So this is from the Met Services Department, and this is cumulative rainfall. And you'll find that the light blue covering from much south extending into much west is the west affected. But we know traditionally that is a very typical low rainfall area. But this year is even more west than typical. It's worse than normal. There are areas which have received less than 200 millimeters in those parts of the country. So if you are tracking a water requirement certification index, this is for maize in terms of how much a crop requires to grow optimally. You find that the southern areas are in crisis. We are experiencing almost complete write-offs for some communities in the south and the bulk of the Midlands regions. There's a little bit of still hope in the northern Mashonalands areas and parts of Manicaland. But I think as we can see, if we just drive outside here, much of the crop is under stress. And a lot of that crop, I think, even if it rains now, a lot of that potential has been lost. We can't salvage much of that crop at all. So those estimates, I think for us, we were kind of looking for anyone who was going to, that's the first estimate that we're getting. I was chatting with him to say it's the first that we are getting. It's very interesting. We have our own figures, but I think we pretty close, but maybe not as high as that. Yeah. So this is the soil moisture index. We track this using satellite imagery, and I think like we are seeing there's a lot of issues in the southern areas, a lot of stress across the bulk of the country. Even where it's satisfactory, if you just go out, you don't think there's much hope for that crop. There isn't much hope for that crop. So it looks like this is going to be a very, the last severe El Nino that we had was 2015, 2016. That was the last severe El Nino that we had. And our production then was about 500,000 metric tons for maize during the last severe El Nino, 500,000 metric tons, just 500,000. For Zimbabwe, we are told our national requirement for maize, we are told is 2.2 million. Yeah, that's what we are told for human livestock. Yeah, human livestock. It's about 2.2 million, somewhere there. So if anything comes below, like if we get to 750, that tells us the amount of imports that we need to bring in, and that we have that much resources, private sector, and even from the government. It's just to show you how the situation is not looking too good. This is Matabeleland South. The red line, it shows the average rains that are received across. It's an average for Mat South. Of course, there are variations here and there, but that's the average for cumulative rainfall for Mat South. So the blue line is for this year. The green was last year. So you can see that last year was also below normal for this region here. Last year, the rains kind of tailed off mid-February. I think most of us can testify to that. Last year. This year, the rains just tailed off around mid-January, almost a month of a leeway. So there's below normal rains. There's likely to be an early cessation of the rainfall season, according to some forecasts that are going on. We are likely not to receive much. If we have, it will be just like periodic erratic rains that may not be sustained over the rest of the growing season. So this is for Matabeleland South. And we know it's a low rainfall area. But for that low rainfall area, when we get below normal for a low rainfall area, we know what it means. For water, for pastures, for crop. Yeah, the next slide is just was an example of one district, Bulilima district in Matabeleland South. That's the next slide. I think last year around November, December, we were all hearing the news in that part of the country, Mat South, especially Bulilima. During that time around December, we were told that Zimbabwe lost about 7,000 cattle to what they call poverty deaths. That's lack of pasture and lack of water. 7,000 were lost officially in Zimbabwe. And about 3,000 of those, that 7,000 was just from one district, Bulilima district. I was there in mid-January, following before it was just after those mid-December, end of December, early January rains. I can tell you there wasn't any improvement. Water-wise, crop-wise, pasture-wise, there weren't any improvements to talk about. So if that situation is sustained up to today, and we are talking of, we are anticipating the next rains towards the October, November, that's when we are anticipating probably our next rains. So what we heard of probably in October, in November, in December, could be child's play going by this. So this is Bulilima. I was just chatting with some of the guys at the Ministry of Agriculture. They were saying they've written off the bulk of their crops. When I went to Bulilima, to Matobo, and parts of Mangwe, there were farmers who didn't plant at all. They had no crop which they put under the ground. So for such populations, when other means of livelihoods, when we compound this with the macroeconomic situation prevailing in the country, we now look at livelihoods in terms of how can they now access like the foods on the markets. That's the other issue. That's our concern now. So even for the next slide, I think it's showing the higher rainfall areas. This is for Mazoe. This is for Mazoe. The red is just the average, just close to average. But you can also tell that the rains just tailed off from around mid-January. And I think for those who drive past Mazoe to Pindura, you can testify the condition of that crop there. Normally, these areas they receive in a good season. These are areas that can significantly above normal rains. We can get very good crops from these areas here. So this is Matobo. This is Matobo in mid-January. Most of the streams are dry. Most of the dams are dry. Some wells which collected water early January, mid-December, they are almost drying off as well. Because besides the dryness, there's also abnormal heat. Abnormal. You see a map which shows that condition. So as of now, even the bores are a main source of water for most of these communities. But the water tables are also receding as we speak. This is February. Water tables are receding in February. The pasture conditions, they just don't look too good at all. This was mid-January in Bulilima. You know that area which had that dam, Ngama Dam, which most of the communities, they were saying it dried for the first time in 37 years. That's the area there. And this was mid-January. There's no pasture as we talk. And some of the communities, you know what happens when we start cropping, you start herding your livestock, your cattle. It didn't happen in some of these communities. They just let the livestock freely move around. There's no crop to protect for some of these communities. So the forecast, I think, for the rest of the season, we are anticipating that below normal rain for the remainder of the whole season. That is, if we have any other incidences of rains. And we are likely to have an early cessation of rainfall. If we have any kind of spells of rains, they are likely to be very, very erratic, very, very unsustained. And the season is almost like, I think the Met guys were also saying the same last time, to say we are almost like folding our nets in terms of the season. So that is the statement that I indicated as of the first week of February. The bulk of the crop is under vegetative stages because of the late plantings. So it won't make it a little bit of so this was NACOF. There was an update of the SACOF, the regional forecast. They had an update in Maputo, end of January. So for Zimbabwe, they still maintained normal to above normal forecast, but slanting more on the below normal side of things. So the bulk of Zimbabwe for the rest of the season, below normal rains. Yeah, this is our climate prediction center. It's one of our main sources of data. So for the region, they issue weekly forecasts. They provide weekly forecasts for Africa and for all parts of the world. So for the southern region, for Zimbabwe, you see there is abnormal dryness forecasted until the 28th of February. And I think going forward, much of the forecasts that we have seen, the early indications are also for abnormal dryness and abnormal heat. This is a very deadly combination, I think. So this is from NOAA, one of our science partners as well. They are also forecasting the same across the region, across Zimbabwe. I've seen now the BBC forecast. They're also showing almost a similar pattern here. very dry across the region, and almost all of Zimbabwe is dry. So I saw somewhere where they're saying the last few days of February, we are likely to have some showers in some places into early March, but I don't think that will be something to write home about. It will be just that erratic and that unsustained rains. So production estimates, this was a statement from an analysis done by WFP, the World Food Programme, when they did some assessments across the region. Predominantly, most of the El Ninos, about 75% is below normal. But for Zimbabwe, for this year, without citing any figures, I think our production is likely to be significantly below normal. For some communities, it will be significantly below normal to no harvest for some communities. And for some households, of course, yeah. So this was just one of the statements issued by a WFP analysis. So the southern areas, they are going to lose much of their crop. Of course, this is for maize. Even the small grains, they have not stood any chance. Even the small grains, the pulses, the legumes, yeah, we don't expect much. Yes, I think we can proceed. So this is the official maize production trend from the Ministry of Agriculture. And like you were saying, last year, the ministry recorded almost like 2.7. 2.4, yeah, 2. Yeah, somewhere there. So like you said, I think there were issues with that that production estimate from last year, because we were told there was a surplus, but I think government ended up saying we can import some stocks. But yeah, we await the government is concluding on the first round crop, livestock, and fisheries assessment. I think it was supposed to be released. We are told this week. But some of the colleagues in the ministry, they are saying now they are no longer worried about area planted because it's of no use now. They are just maybe going to focus on the condition of the crop in various parts of the country, because we can't talk of area when much of it is a write-off. So even officially, if you're going to look at your data, the trends, the data trends, a season like this one, if we have, for example, 1 million hectares was put under production, but for statistics purposes, that doesn't mean anything when there was a crop failure of this nature. So these are some of the things that I think, like my colleague was saying, we need to discuss and say, in such a situation, what area do we report? What cropped area do we report? This is for tobacco. I saw a colleague from the industry marketing board. Yeah. Yeah, tobacco is an interesting crop for us because it's a main income earning crop for some communities, some main communities in the country. So it's an income earner for the farmers who produce the crop, for their communities, and also for a lot of sectors. And tobacco is a major export. I think it's the second after gold. And they say almost 50% of our exports from agriculture are from tobacco. And 30% of our income, forex earned by Zimbabwe, almost 30% is from this crop. I'm not sure. I think he can correct us. So from that angle only, we see this as a very strategic crop, even for the small holder farmers. Livelihoods-wise, tobacco is a very key crop. Cotton is it has been on the rise, but I think there are issues in the cotton sector there. So the marketing season opened on the 13th and the 14th, and that's mainly for irrigated crop, because the rain-fed crop was planted late and it's still in the fields there. So yeah, the farmers, they wanted almost 100% tobacco forex retention, but the government said they can't preferentially treat them that way. They settled for 85%, so they are also getting 75% retention, just like any other sector. Okay, so this is so besides the situation, this is our situation. Another issue that we are always concerned about as FuseNet is the macroeconomic situation, in as much as it influences how households access food on the market, their livelihoods, and how they access food on the markets. So we know the volatility in the market, in the economy, the issue with our the parallel market rates, even the official exchange rates, the interbank rates. So you can see how spiking, especially from around December, somewhere there. So we are anticipating the governor of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe to issue the monetary policy statement. We're not sure when it's coming, but there are indications that there's going to be a new currency, which they are calling a structured currency. The president even mentioned that there will be a structured currency. The governor and the minister of finance, they've been trying to explain to us what it looks like, but maybe probably some of us can assist. Okay. So, but what is clear is that the cost of living is escalating. If we look at the Zim dollar component and also on the US dollar component, not just on the local currency, but also USD wise, the cost of living is escalating. So this was the Consumer Council of Zimbabwe. They reported that in December, the cost of living doubled in December in 1 month. In 1 month, compared to November, there was a doubling of the cost of living in Zim dollar terms. So we know the story of our informal sector and the formal sector, our tax shops, and most of us they are now buying from what we call the tax shops downtown there. So the issues between the preference for buying on the informal markets, where they price mainly in USD because it's lower compared to the formal sector, which is mainly predominantly in Zim dollar denominated pricing. I think this is what we go through this is from Zimstat. They are the latest for January. When Zimstat they share their figures with us just for Harare. We made a special request for Harare, so we get prices for Harare from Zimstat when they share their inflation and cost of living figures. So if you look at these commodities, these 4 commodities, the prices for January, which Zimstat reported, against the prices for just in a month, just look at how the prices increased in just in a month, comparing January of this year and December of last year, 71% increase for maize meal in local currency terms. And if you compare January of this year to January of last year, almost 1,500% increase in the price levels. But the incomes are not corresponding, they are not increasing to those corresponding levels. That's official data from the Zimstat. This is also from the Zimstat. The poverty lines, there's what they call the food poverty lines, just for food, then the total consumption poverty lines. I think the trend is telling. So we have an issue for those who earn in local currency. This is not a good story. We all know about this. It's not a good story. We've got lecturers, I think, from the universities. We are reading that they are planning to down their tools. The mayor of Bulawayo last time, he was saying he's earning like $25. If we translate his ZW income salary in USD terms, is about $25 a month. I think some of you read about it. Yeah, this is happening. So for those earning in local currency, yeah, well, some of them, they actually go and buy Forex on the black market to purchase on the informal market in USD terms. So like we mentioned, we also have got significant USD price increases, especially since December 2023, when that's the 2024 national budget was pronounced by the Minister of Finance. I think it triggered significant price increases with the additional tax measures that were taken. So the government has moved to kind of adjust with the VAT, removal of the VAT for some commodities, and the imposition of the import duty for basic commodities. So like Zimstat is saying with the prices study, they are saying almost like 83% of our transactions for those commodities, they are now in USD, which is very worrisome when we have a significant population which is earning in local currency as well. So this is just for maize, around November, December, I think there was a huge jump in maize grain prices. I think most of us who visit our local open markets, they can tell this. You can see some places like in Harare, prices jumped from about $6 to about $8, $9. For some markets like Urungwe is a surplus producing area. Around November, it was $4 per bucket. This is a bucket of maize, 17.5 kilograms. A bucket from about $4 to $8. That's the price is doubled in 1 month. And those prices have remained sustained. So if we are going to have significantly low production, it means these prices are not going to respect the harvest period. That seasonal drop in prices, we are not going to experience it. It might be just be marginal, but they will remain sustained at very high levels. And in terms of access to basic commodities, to grains, to most of the basic foods for most of our populations, we find a lot of people going to struggle. And this is likely to happen until the next harvest in 2025, until 2025. So as we go forward, the situation doesn't look too good. So yeah, I think we're almost done. So in terms of livelihoods, most of the livelihoods, I think they are below normal. They are below normal in terms of most of the expected, like casual labor. Casual labor is linked to seasonal performance of the season. We don't talk of casual labor at the moment because there isn't much or any across most areas. Most of these, I think they are below normal. You can tell livestock sales, like with the condition of the animals that we are having. And going forward, we anticipate even higher numbers of livestock deaths. Vegetable production sales, yeah. I think the only two typical forms of livelihoods that may perform above normal are petty trade and probably informal mining. I was in Matabeleland South. That delicious wild produce there is called amakimbi, Madora. Yeah, there's none of that this year. There are two Madora harvesting seasons or Makimbi harvesting seasons in Zimbabwe. There's December and January is the first harvest season. Then there's March and April. So December, January, there was none. There was completely no Madora at all. And this coming one is also no Madora at all. I was at Renkini Market in Bulawayo. Normally around this time, you get a bucket of that Madora for about $18 to $20. In January, mid-January, when I visited that market, it was going for $80, 80, that bucket. I called my sister who is in Bulawayo last weekend to say, check for me the price of Madora. There was no Madora on the market, completely none. Yet for most communities, that's an income generator, and also it's food. It's food. So thank you.
It's been an afternoon of depression, I think. Are there any questions or comments for Gift? Yes, sir.
Yeah, for now we are keeping it under wraps. For now we want to. Yeah, we are releasing our we call it the Food Security Outlook. We are releasing our major report for this year, which covers February to September. It's coming at the end of February. So if we can have your contacts, you can request you to subscribe for our reports. They are public reports. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we just, like we mentioned, we are just going indicative, but we can't mention a figure. That's very sensitive for us to do so at the moment.
I think it's very hard to put a figure to the point. As it currently stands, there's so much that can change in the next couple of weeks. So even saying 750, we could be completely wrong. We've heard figures of 1.1 million, I think, quite recently in the last couple of days. But I don't think much confidence in around the 1.1 million tons of crop.
I think there's a question right at the back.
Especially for our current trust unit, where there is a lot of excessive underground water extraction. So what it means is for the next 25 to 50 years, we have more problems because there is no deliberate effort at the moment, even at policy level, to safeguard underground water. And we should have more deliberate efforts towards harvesting water above groundwater. Also, if you closely check from the past 5 to 10 years, we have seen a resurgence of private sector players that are actually involved in underground water extraction, both urban and rural. So it becomes a risk, especially 25, 50 years, 100 years to come, where our poorest of the poor smallholder farmers may not have means to extract it more than 50, 100 meters underground. So I think it's for us as private sector players to probably even engage government in terms of the key safeguards for underground water. But in some rural areas, especially at district level, where full council meetings, there is now in apportionment to say each ward we need to be installing so many homes. But that's a risk because they are not being planning on above water mechanisms, which should be more substantial in the short medium to long term.
Thanks for the comment. Brendan, did you have something?
So I took in reference to maize potential maize production uptick, a large statistic, and as Jacques alluded to, the Thursday we meet directly with them. Of that 2 million hectares estimated to have been planted, about 1.6 to 1.7 million came under the category of, and this was government statement, was self-financed small-scale farming. And that was, I've been doing this since 2001. I haven't seen that category grow. So I think that's where our skepticism as private sector came from, to say, well, the crop actually hasn't translated to crop on the ground. And that's also been seen with the GD wheat payment scenarios that the NPC and Ministry of Finance seem to be focused on wanting a structured currency in the same environment where the situation has actually been created by lack of liquidity. Crop hasn't been planted, private sector don't have sufficient wherewithal to pay a market price. Farmers' ambitions around planting wind crop are now massively subdued because of water currency, etc. And Sandy's question to point too is to say, well, is there going to be inflation? Theoretically, no, there shouldn't be. South Africa got a 14 million ton crop, and we need to get it here. And unfortunately, as traders in the room, there's a term of conveniency of so the stuff here will be priced tight, especially in an environment where nearly 70% of your economy is informal. They don't sit in rooms like this when we talk about food security and sit about profit.
Thanks, Brendan. Rodney, did you have something?
Side, I wanted to check the 14% livestock tax being implemented at the farmer level, because I'm trying to reflect what's going to be the impact with animals coming on the market, then we tax them again 15%. Is it at the farmer level?
I'm not sure. Probably some from that sector, livestock sector, probably they can help.
Is it at farmer level?
On meat.
On meat, that we said they're not used to.
Yeah, I'm not too sure where that's being applied.
My understanding from speaking to farmers is that it is, and there's quite a bit of lobbying, but I don't know for sure.
I was talking to a livestock trader this morning, and or somebody who's involved in the cattle industry, and they were saying that the slaughterings are way down because people are refusing to pay the additional 15%. So they've just stopped eating meat. But also they know that they don't have any crops in the ground, so they're keeping what little money they've got for basic foods. And meat is considered as a luxury by most people now. So the slaughterings across the whole industry apparently are way down. But I don't have direct confirmation of that from any of the other class association at the moment.
Any more for gift? Yes, Virginia.
I think this El Nino was announced last year. I think it started already in
September last year, that it was clear that it's going to be a new year again. And
Yeah.
with the experience in 15, 16, you wonder why this is happening again. So, I mean, this is very much, there's a need to address these very structural problems. I haven't, and this is shocking. And also at the moment, we have this extreme donor fatigue. So whether there will be a lot of funding then for even humanitarian interventions to support those who are severely food insecure, I don't know. I mean, we are also competing with Ukraine, with South Sudan, and all the other crises in the world. So
Yeah.
this is really very, very worrisome. But at the same time, it's those structural, systemic problems which are not being addressed. And I highly appreciate the comment also on the water situation on the long term, which is another. The government doesn't have any clue about the underground water situation, and it's still watching it. In fact, planning on. Yeah, and drilling a borehole in each and every village.
Yeah.
It's not having any water harvesting ideas on public buildings or even on private buildings. It's really shocking and very frustrating.
That's very true. I think that's why I think the issues of resilience are quite buzzworthy. Government-wise, government side partners, everybody is talking about this. But even in government, I think they've gotten tired of humanitarian assistance. You know, this year they said they are issuing that humanitarian assistance on the basis that someone has done they've tied it to Intwasa, Fumbodza. If you have dug those plots, if you have implemented Intwasa or Fumbodza, you now qualify for humanitarian assistance. If you have not, I don't know whether it's happening or not, but that's the policy now. Starting this season, that's the government policy. I'm not sure whether it's for those who are probably, I'm not sure.
They're going to be absorbing that. Another issue. There's also the outbreak of feet and mouth, especially on southeastern Lowville. So which means there farmers are stuck with cattle they might be ready to get rid of so that at least they can earn something right now. So that's an issue. So which means going forward, as we progress into the next rain season, there's the crisis in terms of selling cattle.
Yeah.
And that is going to be another issue which we really need to look into as regards to how do we go in and try and salvage some breeding stock out there so that at least the cattle industry can recover. Yes, it was on the recovery, but right now I think it's going to plunge down. So situation.
Thanks, Kuda.
Yeah, for livestock, I think our fears are that the livestock deaths might be record deaths this season. We anticipate very huge numbers. For water, I think Zinwa this week they issued a statement that they are now going vigorously monitoring these unlicensed bore drillings. I think it's a move which is there in the press. Some of you have noticed. So they want the money, but also probably is for that reason. It will be for the tax, for the income, but for also probably.
Robert's got a question.
So I think it may be good for us to consider alternatives. Not stick to the traditional grains, traditional small grains or something. We have crops like sweet potato, the crops like cassava, which can actually do under some variable or low rainfall condition. So I think it's high time we start actually promoting this. 2015, 16, and 2024, less than 10 years. Who knows, maybe 5 years to come, we're also going to have something that is even worse than what we have now. So my brother at the back was talking about sustainability 50 years from now.
I'm just wondering whether we will get to that 50% at the rate at which this phenomena, the climate change issue is going. If you look at Spain, for example, the world is actually coming in terms of food production. In Spain, they're actually desalinating seawater currently to irrigate their fields. So it actually tells the story with regards to food production globally. European farmers are actually striking right now in terms of the low food prices and stuff. So they may not be able actually to produce enough food actually for export as well. So I'm not so sure, but I think it's high time we consider promoting alternatives that requires law enforcement.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah.
Okay, so we let you off the hook. Thank you very much. It was an excellent once again. Yeah.